Intermind model. This paper will present a new perspective for thinking about how consciousness might occur in the mind. Consciousness has many aspects that could be used as discussion tools, but for this paper, the conscious perception of light and sound will be emphasized. Light and sound perception seem to be things that could be understood using basic engineering and scientific reasoning. Note that many acronyms will be developed in this section. You can move the pointer over any acronym to see the meaning. Unfortunately, this feature does not work with some phones. The prevailing scientific view is that consciousness is in the neurons or is an emergent property of neural activity. Amazingly, some even declare that just saying in the neurons or emergent property explains consciousness. They will say there is nothing else to explain here, but they cannot explain how consciousness is in the neurons or is an emergent property. Rather, they just believe that to be the case. Other scientists and mostly philosophers simply say that consciousness is just an illusion, which seems to me to be totally unscientific. When they say that consciousness is just an illusion, are they saying that consciousness does not really exist? Have they ever actually seen light or heard sound? A growing number of scientists and philosophers at least admit that they do not know. They have produced such concepts as the explanatory gap by Joseph Levine in Materialism and Qualia, the hard problem and the easy problem, by David Chalmers in The Conscious Mind, and the concept of sensory, Qualia by Clarence Irving Lewis in Mind and the World Order. The state-of-the-art in brain physiology these days can describe how electromagnetic waves, physical light, hitting the retina cause signals to be generated in nerve paths that travel from the eye through the brain into the visual cortex in back of the head. A vast amount of parallel processing occurs, and specific areas of the visual cortex will fire for various different aspects of the light scene that is being viewed. Some neurons will fire for straight lines, some neurons will fire for various specific colors, some neurons will fire for image motion, and other neurons will fire for any number of other specific aspects of the light scene. These are the neural correlates of consciousness for light perception, as described by Christoph Koch in The Quest for Consciousness. The problem is that the brain is an electrochemical machine, and nowhere during all the processing that goes on can you find the actual conscious experience/perception of light. I like to say that when you have a conscious experience/perception of light that you are seeing conscious light. I also want to emphasize the distinction between physical light, PL, and conscious light, CL. The physical light is electromagnetic waves which are always colorless, but it is the conscious light that we actually experience/perceive and therefore see. The conscious light is a surrogate for the physical light. This distinction between physical light and conscious light must be understood more fully. We can say that before consciousness there was no light on the planet, just electromagnetic waves. Of course, we mean there was no conscious light on the planet, but there was only physical light. This paper will attempt to make the distinction between physical light and conscious light more plausible and understandable. Philosophers like to call conscious light the light qualia. My spell checker does not even know the word qualia. Many people in science don't like the word qualia, and in fact someone once posted that qualia was invented by idiot philosophers. I would like to avoid that controversy. I like the symmetry and intuitiveness of saying physical light and conscious light. I also like to say that physical light exists in physical space, PSP, and conscious light exists in conscious space, CSP. We can also talk about physical sound, PS, which consists of pressure waves in the air, and conscious sound, CS, which is the sound that we experience in conscious space. The light and sound that we have always experienced is conscious light and conscious sound, not physical light and physical sound. The physical light and physical sound exist in physical space, but the conscious light and conscious sound exist in conscious space. In talking about conscious space, it is assumed that it is not a space like our physical three-dimensional universe, but it is certainly a different realm or reality. I decided that saying conscious realm was too spooky and maybe misleading, so I am going to stick with conscious space. Conscious space may ultimately be recognized to be an aspect of physical space, but at this point, it is better to keep it distinct. I think that eventually, conscious space will be recognized as a completely different thing than we can imagine today. The important thing to remember is that the intermind model anticipates that the universe consists of a separate physical space and a separate conscious space. These are two different phenomena spaces. Physicalists will try to push conscious space into physical space, and idealists will try to push physical space into conscious space. But neither of these phenomena spaces will be pushed into the other, as will be described in later sections. I would like to refer to the brain as the physical mind, PM. I would also like to refer to the thing that experiences the conscious light or conscious sound as the conscious mind, CM. The conscious mind contains your personal conscious I or self. Using these definitions and abbreviations, I would like to present the following diagram to show what we know so far about the conscious perception of light. Note that a similar diagram could be drawn for the conscious perception of sound. The physical mind is defined to consist of the brain and all connected sensory devices, like eyes and ears. The retina of the eye is acknowledged to be made up of specialized neurons, so it is an actual component of the physical mind. It's easy to see why the physical light arrow is connected directly to the physical mind. The instant physical light hits the physical mind, it is not physical light anymore, but rather it is converted into neural activity that is transmitted to the various visual areas inside the physical mind. Since the neural activity occurs in the visual areas of the physical mind and the neural activity is correlated with the physical light, I like to call this particular neural activity the neural light, NL. The diagram shows that even though the neural light is correlated with the physical light, it is not conscious light yet. The conscious light that we actually perceive is correlated with the neural light and therefore with the physical light. The heart of the problem is that conscious light cannot be found in the physical mind by studying the neural light. We are sure we know two things. 1. When neural light occurs in the physical mind. 2. There is correlated conscious light occurring in the conscious mind. Both of these are also correlated with the original physical light. There is an analogous argument for physical sound, neural sound, NS, and conscious sound. I would like to make a quick comment about my definition of neural light. The complaint that people have had was that neural activity is not light. Of course, it's not physical light, but the neural light that I talk about is actually more related to the conscious light that we experience. What we experience is a further processing stage that uses the neural light to produce the conscious light. We have never seen the physical light. We have only seen the conscious light, which is the internal light that does not come through the eyes. The conscious light is correlated with the neural light, which in turn is correlated with the physical light. The physical light is just some electromagnetic phenomenon that can stimulate neural light. If you rub your eyes the right way, you will see lights. Rubbing your eyes can stimulate neural light, which results in a conscious light experience. Now think about the conscious light experience you have while dreaming at night in your bedroom, where there is almost no physical light. You could say that dreams are made out of conscious light. If it's not conscious light, then what is it? The one thing we can say for sure is that this dream light is certainly inside of us. Also think about the conscious light experience of after images, where you continue to see a remnant of the scene you were looking at even after you close your eyes. Obviously, we can and do experience conscious light without physical light. We have always seen our own conscious light, but we did not know it was ours. This should become more understandable after reading the two argument sections. I take the position that the physical mind is an electrochemical machine that exists in physical space. I will speculate that the physical mind has no consciousness in and of itself. I will also speculate that the conscious mind exists as a separate phenomenon, and I say that the conscious mind exists in conscious space. I justify these speculations given the fact that science is getting nowhere assuming that consciousness has to be inside the neurons. It is time to start thinking about these things in new ways. It is time to break through the brick wall that is blocking our progress from understanding consciousness. But how does the neural light in the physical mind get converted to conscious light that the conscious mind can use? Somehow the conscious mind must monitor the neural light in the physical mind and then generate the conscious light for the conscious mind. I propose that there must be some other mind component that monitors the neural light in the physical mind and converts this into the conscious light that the conscious mind experiences. I call this other mind the intermind, IM, because it is an interface between the physical mind and the conscious mind. The intermind is a logical scientific, systems engineering, and signal processing stage that must exist between the physical mind and the conscious mind in order to convert neural activity into conscious experience. From these definitions, we can now draw the following diagram for the conscious perception of light. Note that a similar diagram could be drawn for the conscious perception of sound. This diagram is for the light path, and it compresses many complicated things into a simple triple mind model that is easily remembered and conceptualized. I like to call it the intermind model, IMM, to emphasize the central role that the intermind plays. I think the intermind is but yet another thing that we do not know, but yet we know we need it. It is probably counterintuitive, but I think the introduction of this new unknown might actually help us understand the other unknowns in the whole mind problem. We need to at least know what it is that we don't know. People will say the intermind model is not parsimonious, or they will invoke Occam's razor as arguments against it. But parsimony and Occam's razor are not scientific principles, rather they are more like folk science. Also, the intermind model is not a theory, but rather it is a framework for future theories. I believe the intermind model framework will be a blueprint for the next step in the exploration of consciousness. I would like to introduce the term connectism to identify a new philosophical concept that easily and naturally conforms to the intermind model of consciousness. Connectism provides a refreshing connection perspective with respect to conscious experience. With proper usage, you would say that you are a connectist because of your connectist views on connectism. Connectism seems to be similar to dualism, but it is different from dualism because the dualist does not emphasize the connection aspect of the physical mind to the conscious mind. The intermind is the central connecting component within connectism. The physical mind is connected to the intermind, and the intermind is connected to the conscious mind. So connectism is actually a triple mind perspective, in contrast with the double mind perspective of dualism. The intermind looms large within connectism but is completely absent in dualism. Connectism is categorically not the same thing as dualism. The intermind could be a part of the physical mind, or the conscious mind, or it could stand alone as a separate mind. Whatever the case may be, there must be something somewhere that has the functionality of the intermind. If the intermind is found to be an aspect of the physical mind, then that aspect should be called the intermind aspect of the physical mind. Neural light does not turn into conscious light all by itself. Even if everything is eventually found to be located in the physical mind, the functional stages of the diagram must still be true. Philosophers will say the intermind is just the explanatory gap. I would say that the intermind is more specifically a connection gap and a processing gap, rather than a more general explanatory gap. Evidence for these connection gap and processing gap ideas will be presented in later sections. Note that the intermind model shows that the intermind presents the conscious light to the conscious mind, but the process of how this happens is not known. The conscious light is not physical light, so we should not expect that the conscious mind will need some conscious space retina to perceive it, leading to an infinite regression of other forms of light and other forms of retinas. The conscious mind is the endpoint of the perception chain, even if we do not yet understand how the conscious light is experienced by the conscious mind. The infinite regression idea comes from the Cartesian theater argument put forward by Daniel Dennett. It is not a serious argument, and its main purpose is to portray a jokingly derogatory picture of the dualistic view. It is incoherent because the first premise of the argument states that you must throw out the dualistic view without any logical reasoning and assume a physicalist reality. If you do that, the infinite regression will be needed. The joke is really on the physicalists because the dualistic view does not need the infinite regression. Only the physicalist view needs it. There are phenomena in physics that are considered to be fundamental because they are not explainable or reducible to any other phenomena. Such phenomena as the magnetic, electric, gravity, and atomic forces are fundamental. Science does not have an explanation for what these phenomena are at a deep level. Science can only describe how these phenomena behave and how they might interact. We will consider consciousness to be a fundamental phenomenon in the manifest universe. Scientists can describe conscious experiences, but science does not know what they are at a deep level. We can now specify that there are two phenomena spaces, which are the physical space, PSP, of physical phenomena and the conscious space, CSP, of conscious phenomena. Since we recognize consciousness to be a fundamental phenomenon, we should not be discouraged by the inability to understand consciousness. We should instead be satisfied with the ability to describe how consciousness might interact with other phenomena of physics. It is specified by the intermind model that this interaction will take place in the intermind part of the model. We do not need to explain the deep meaning of consciousness right now, but rather we should concentrate on discovering what an intermind might be within the model. We have some clues how this intermind interaction happens in the brain, and we will speculate how this intermind interaction might happen in machines. This website will explore such machine interactions in later sections. Going back to the three-stage diagram of the intermind model, physical light is converted into neural light by the physical mind in physical space, and then neural light is converted into conscious light by the intermind, and then conscious light is what is actually perceived by the conscious mind in conscious space. But the physical light, neural light, and conscious light are three very different kinds of phenomena related to the experience of light. The physical light is electromagnetic energy, the neural light is neural activity in the visual areas, and the conscious light is the thing that we actually experience. The safe answer, as to the nature of conscious light, is that it is an unknown phenomenon at this point in time. However, we might draw our conscious light from a shared reservoir of conscious light that is already in conscious space. In this way, we would acquire our conscious light from conscious space. Alternatively, I might create my own conscious light, and every other person on the planet might create their own conscious light. This would mean that we all have our own personal conscious light, acquired or created, that we use to guide us while moving around in the world. No one sees physical light, but only their own personal conscious light. I have my light, you have your light, we all have our own light. We don't really see in the way we think we do. Rather, we examine our conscious light to determine what we are looking at. So instead of asking the question, "What do you see?" we should ask, "What does your conscious light show you?" Comprehending this conscious light is the prize. It is a thing in itself that we need to understand. It is a phenomenon that exists in the manifest universe that science does not yet know how to handle. What is that high-def, multicolored, conscious light visual experience that floats in front of our faces? In order to completely experience this conscious light, you must think about it deeply. Eventually, you might realize something amazing. But do not be discouraged at this early point, because the rest of this website is written to help you find the prize.